Alright guys, welcome back. I have a few requests, questions, whatnot. People have asked over the last couple of months, and I've told them I'll make a video of it here eventually. But the video today is going to be about one of the most asked questions. And I have a couple people that keep asking it all the time. How do I get started farming or homesteading? I myself right now consider myself a farmer, not a homesteader, because we don't live basically off the farm. My wife has an off the farm job. Eventually I would like to get to where we are considered a homestead, we have a goal to where down the road, 15 years from now, my wife can stay home and we can make all of our living off of this place. And you have to have a realistic goal, not, oh, next year we're going to stay home. It's not, unless you're debt free, you can't do it. So, I guess this video is kind of going to be about that. My views or my idea on how to get started farming or homesteading or whatever you want to be. Like I say, as of right now, I'm a farmer. I'm not a homesteader. If you look up all the different terminology of a homesteader, I don't really fit the, I don't really fit the description right now. But eventually I'd like to be where that's what I am considered, or we are considered, this farm is considered. But until we get more debt paid off and get farther ahead and get to where my wife doesn't have to go to a job every day, we're going to be a farm, not a homestead. But whatever you want to be, whether it be a farmer or a homesteader, the question is, how do you get started? Well, my advice to you, it kind of depends. If you grew up on a farm, you kind of already have an idea of what it takes to be a farmer, or even kind of a homesteader. The thing is, really in our lifetime, we don't really know what a homesteader is compared to what our parents maybe did, or even our parents, our grandparents did. We have been so far removed from the whole farming atmosphere that most people don't even know where their food comes from. So even my generation, growing up, I grew up on a beef farm. Both my parents had an off-the-farm job, and I grew up milking cows for my best friend's dad, and I milked cows there for the better part of my high school and middle school life. I missed out on taking over a family farm, which is in the past. We can't dwell on the past. And the farm I grew up on obviously was a small beef, basically what you would consider a hobby farm, because both my parents had an off-the-farm job. So that wasn't really an option to farm there. And with me growing up with the beef and growing up on, milking cows, I knew I wanted to be a farmer. I had some detours along the way, and it's still a struggle every day. Even after owning this place for 12 years now, going on 13, it's a struggle every day, and a lot of that's my own fault. And hopefully, somebody watching this, hopefully they'll take into consideration some of my faults and mistakes that I've made and not make them, and be farther ahead in 12 years than I am. But back to the other topic of homesteading. Growing up, we had a big garden. We had, the whole garden thing, and we had our own beef. But, a lot of homesteaders, they don't leave the farm or their homestead. They're there all the time. They get, the majority of their stuff off their own place, and whatever they don't produce there, they trade what they have whether it be for cash to go buy something that they need from a store, or they trade their goods for other goods that they need. So regardless of what you want to do, if you want to farm and you want to homestead, some of the farming and homesteading go together. And I'm just going to give you my take on it, or my experience, maybe some advice. So if you grew up on a farm, you already kind of know, you have a little background with the animals and probably with some gardening and stuff like that. You know, horticulture, that type of thing. You have probably a little bit of an understanding of taking care of animals, growing plants, taking care of plants, all that kind of thing. But if you are not from a farming background or a rural background, I mean, there's people from a rural background that aren't necessarily a farm, but they had some animals and they raised a garden, whatever. I'm talking about the people that didn't come from this type of background, that came from the town, and they hear farming and homesteading and think, you know, all they see is the romantic thought of the peacefulness and, you know, sitting on the front porch, kick back, chewing on a piece of straw deal. That's not, it's far from that. Anybody that has time to sit on the deck all day long and chew on a piece of straw and sip sweet tea all day, I don't know how they ever made it. They had to have been a millionaire before they moved out of town. But if you come from, say you're in town and you think you want to homestead or farm, first thing I would do is try and find a place where you can raise an animal and maybe have a little garden. Try and find a place you can rent outside of town. Normally you can find somebody to rent something from. If you can find a farm outside of town, anymore is getting to be where farms are getting so big. These bigger farms have parts of the farm that to these big guys isn't usable to them. If their center pivot don't reach it, they don't farm it. We have that around here, where the corners of these big fields that the center pivot can't get, they kind of sit there. They'll plant a cover crop and it just sits there. Maybe try and get with one of these bigger operations outside of town and see if they have a little piece of land that you could rent for a year or two. You know, if maybe you can find a little corner of their field where it's a couple acres, ask them if you can, you know, get one of these portable sheds that a guy can set up, and, you know, you could house an animal or two in there. Invest the money into fencing and renting it from them, and maybe a little portable shelter that, if it works out for you, you can take with you. Fencing can be taken down and taken with you. Try and find something like that and try it for a year or two. Try raising animals, try raising a little bit of a garden. See if it's for you before you take the plunge of buying property out in the country and it not working out. I have seen a lot of people that thought it sounded awesome and great to raise calves and raise beef, and they hardly got those calves weaned and they were sick of them, or they couldn't understand it took so long to get it took 2 years to finish a steer. You know, a lot of people just, they can't follow through with it. They can't handle how long it takes for something to happen. So they back out before it's ever finished or accomplished. So my suggestion is try and find a piece of ground that you can rent and just dabble in a little bit first. Because if you don't like raising cows, well, right there you can scratch that off your list. If you don't like raising sheep or goats or whatever else, if it's not going to work for you, it's not going to work. If you try having a garden and you can't figure out how to get a garden to grow, it's probably not going to work. And property is not cheap. In different parts of the country it probably is, but where I live, property is not cheap. Bare ground in this area is minimum $3,500 an acre. And that's on a large piece of ground. Anything less than 20 acres, you could pay almost 10 grand an acre for bare ground that doesn't have a well, doesn't have a septic, doesn't have nothing. That's a lot of change, a lot of investment for something that you're kind of just going on a whim and it might work for you. rent a little piece of ground, try it first, see how it works for you. If it works, you love it, then you can start looking for a piece of property. And if you can rent a little piece of ground, rent is a lot cheaper than a mortgage payment sometimes. But at least when you're renting, if it doesn't work out, you can pull out and take off. If you're tied into a mortgage and it doesn't work out, and you're back treading water, you're up to your ears in debt and finances, and your cattle all died and your crops don't grow, you're in some major trouble. And situation A, with renting ground not working out, you walk away, you're done. You have property you can't make the payments on, you're struggling, and all of a sudden you file bankruptcy. That kind of kicks you in the butt for quite a few years afterwards, and it's hard to get back on your feet. So my suggestion would be to try and find a little piece of ground to rent, try it out. If it works, give it a couple years. If you can rent a decent little piece of ground and you can build up a little bit of a herd before you buy land, it's going to be easier than buying land and not having anything and then trying to start. And if you're trying to get into the cattle business, cows aren't cheap. If you're going to buy a decent cow, you're going to spend at least $1,200 depending on where you're at, and that's not going to be a high quality cow. If you want high quality, beautiful, show quality cattle, you better add another one in front of that. Add a one to the one. You're talking $2,000 or better, and there's no income from that yet. Before you can even get an income off that, it's going to be at least a year and a half, 2 years, and you have an input into it for a long time before you ever get anything back out of it. So if you could start where you could have a herd started before you even buy a property, you're going to be that much farther ahead. And if you don't have, let's say you have $1,200 and you're thinking about buying a cow, but you can go and buy one cow, or you can take the $1,200 and go buy a couple bottle calves for $80 to $100 a piece. By the time you're done, you've got another $60 to $100 into a milk replacer and starter feed to get them going. But then you've got that many more head to start out with versus just one cow that you got to wait a whole year to get a calf out of her, and then you got to wait a year and a half before her calf is ready to go, whether it be to breed again or to butcher or whatever. It takes a lot longer to get a herd built up when you start with one versus if you go out and buy 5 or 10. And if you're going to spend $1,200 and you only bring home one animal versus you spend $1,200 to go bring 6 animals home, it looks like a lot more when you look at 6 versus 1. Granted, when you buy the 6, if you buy calves, it's going to be 13, 14 months before you can breed them. You got another 9 months before you get calves out of them. But you're still that much farther ahead in buying the calves and raising them. Now, those are going to be dairy calves. Depending on what you think you want to do, dairy calves aren't the way to go if you're going to be a beef farmer, obviously. If you're in the right spot, there are people that will breed beef cattle to their Holstein cows because they figure if they're going to get a bull calf out of them, a bull calf finishes faster if it's beef cross than just a Holstein. And a lot of these guys, a beef heifer calf is worth way more than a Holstein heifer calf. So a lot of these guys around this area have been breeding their Holstein dairy cows with a black Angus. They have a black-white heifer, calf that's born. They'll send them to the sale barn, and normally they can get enough out of that beef dairy cross heifer calf to turn around and buy 2 to 3 Holstein heifer calves back. So beef heifer calf is going to cost more. But if you find one of these guys that's doing that, you could probably buy 3 or 4 heifer calves versus one cow. And I'm saying one open cow. If you're lucky enough to find somebody that you can buy a bred cow from, you're probably not going to get it for $1,200. I mean, If you go to the sale barn and take your chance on buying something that's not junk, you're going to pay more than that. I mean, look on Craigslist, look around, you can kind of get an idea of what people are selling bred cows for. And the thing is, somebody can sell you a bred cow, it's not guaranteed she's going to have a calf. She could abort before then, she could, miscarriage. That calf could be born dead. She could die giving birth to that calf. There's a lot of negatives that could happen out of this. And if you go and invest, like I know I just looked on Craigslist yesterday, and there's a bunch of bred beef cows for sale, fourth and fifth calf cows, $2,300 a pop. Well, if you take that $2,300 and you start feeding that cow for 9 months, and then all of a sudden she gives birth to a dead calf, you're out a calf and you still have all that money into her. Or worst case, she dies giving birth to that calf. Now you're out $2,300 plus what it costs to feed her, and you're out the cow. So if you took that $2,300 and bought some heifer calves and raised them up, and it's going to cost a little bit more money. It's going to take a little bit longer. But if say your first cow does survive, you have her, then you have her calf. Let's say she has a heifer calf. Now it's 14 months until her heifer calf can be bred. You breed her back, a couple months after she calves. It's going to take you longer to build up to get those 4 to 6 calves versus just buying 6 calves and starting a herd that way. Granted, it is, 14 plus 9 before you get calves out of those 6. But if one of those 6 happens to die giving birth, you still have 5 more there. You didn't lose everything in that one investment. That's where I'm kind of going with it. You don't want to put all your money and all your investment into one basket. You don't want, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I wouldn't put all my investment into one thing. And if you can buy it, if you can rent a piece of ground to try it on first, you're better off that way. If you can get your cows going, you can get a herd started, it's going great for you. You go to the banker, I want to buy a piece of land, this is what I'm looking at. And in the meantime, you're going to have a job, I'm sure. Well, you have your job income, but now you also can show, hey, I have these cows that are worth X amount of dollars. Their calves are worth X amount of dollars. They're bred back. I have, a cycle going here. That looks better on paper for trying to get a loan or a mortgage for land. And it gives you the experience in the meantime, whether you can handle it or not. Because if you can't handle stress with cattle, you're probably not going to be able to raise cattle. So that's where I would start if you're thinking about getting into it and you have no experience, try and rent a little piece of ground first and go that route. And then, let's say you do this, it all works out for you. You have it in your mind, that's what you're going to do. Don't buy anything you can't handle. Don't look for the biggest piece of property just because you think, more is better. It's not, more isn't always better. And when you do buy that piece of ground and you're starting to buy equipment to do your stuff, don't buy the most expensive piece of equipment because payments suck. I can tell you from experience, payments suck. I am in that situation right now where I'm about tapped out on making payments. And some of you have probably gathered with me talking about tractors that I'm probably looking to make some changes to try and get rid of some debt to get out of some payments. It's a lot easier to get ahead in life if you don't have payments versus everything you make going to the bank. So, with that being said, if you can get by with a $3,500 tractor, buy the $3,500 tractor. Don't go buy a $10,000 tractor just because it's got a cab on it. That can come later when you have money in the bank. And that's where I've always had a problem. I grew up with nice equipment. My dad had, decent equipment, but it wasn't top of the line. But where I worked, I always had nice equipment. Well, I have that in my head that you got to have a 4440, you got to have a 6400, got to have all this big expensive payments. Well, I'm to the point now where I want to get out of that crap, get the other stuff rolling, and then once there's money in the bank, now it's time to upgrade to a 6400. Hindsight's 2020. Don't go into debt. You're gonna have a mortgage payment. Most of us are. I mean, it takes a lot of years working a day job, making a rent payment to save up enough money to buy land or to buy a place you can move into. You know, it takes a long time. And if you're like me, you don't want to wait till you're 50 years old to have the money to finally move out there, and then you're too tired to do all the work that's got to be done. It's just as easy to start now, you know, in my mind, start now and get going and have it done, so when you're 50 years old, it's already going, you just stay on an even keel and you're already doing it. That's my mentality. But that being said, don't get in over your head on debt. That's really all I can say. Don't overdo it with debt. And research more on what it costs to do this stuff. You can sit down with a piece of pen and paper and go through 100 pages and jotting it down. Oh, it looks perfect on paper, but it's never going to be perfect when you're done. In the real world, never comes out the way it does on paper, so I found. And I don't know too many people that ever guarantee that what they did on this piece of paper is what's exactly going to happen on their farm or homestead. It just doesn't work that way. There's so many unforeseen things that happen that, you know, you can't foresee happening, and they do. But it's not all bad either. Once you have a handle on what's going on, you have everything rolling, then it's not bad. Once you know animals and you know how to garden and do all this stuff, you can kind of roll with the punches that are thrown at you. It's just in the beginning, it's hard. But, you know, once you know how to take care of a cow, and once you know what she looks like when she doesn't feel good, or once you get to know cows, you can read them almost like a book. Oh, she's this or she's that, or, I mean, I can walk out with my heifers right now and tell you which ones are bred and which ones aren't, and I haven't preg checked. There's little signs in heifers that you can tell she's bred. She's not. If she is bred, she's not showing signs yet, but she could be 3 months farther behind than the other one that looks like she's bred, because my bull was out for 3 months. But you pick up on those things, you can kind of, you know, you get more experience with it, things are better. It's like with gardening. I'm not the world's greatest gardener, but over time you pick up on little things that you made a mistake, you learn from it, next year's better. I don't want to discourage anybody from following their dreams. I just want them to think a little bit of reality into it and be prepared for what could happen. Farming is not easy. Farming's not cheap, and it's not a get-rich-quick scheme either. I honestly don't know any farmers really who are rich. They might be land rich, but they're penny poor. And they didn't get that way overnight. And most of them that are that way, it's usually 4 or 5 generations into it. I myself, you know, my dad farmed, but he was a hobby farmer. He wasn't a full-time farmer. My grandfather was a full-time farmer. My great-grandpa was a full-time farmer. My great-great-grandpa was a full-time farmer. So, do you consider me 5th generation or first? I'm first on this farm. I'm going at it alone. Granted, the 60 out there is my dad's, and when I first started, I had his round baler. Other than that, everything else has been acquired by me, and the income I had off my job when I first started here, or what I've been making off the farm. So I don't know what you consider me, 5th or 1st or whatever. I mean, I grew up with it, so. But anyways, regardless of that, you can be a city folk and move to the country, and you can be one of the best farmers in the world. There's proof of it. Go on YouTube. There's guys out there that do it. There's one guy that is doing it, and he makes it look really easy. And I admire him for that. It's not easy. He just makes it look easy. But anyways, that's just my little quick advice on how to, if you're thinking about farming or homesteading, how to try it without diving headfirst into it. Because there's nothing worse than trying something and it fails and you're screwed. like I say, if you can rent that piece of ground, try it, and if it doesn't work, you still have your apartment in town or your house in town or whatever you have. You still have that. You still have your job. The animal thing didn't work out. Well, maybe the homesteading thing's not going to work out. You have your other thing to fall back on. Not dive headfirst into the whole homesteading thing and it doesn't work out, and now you're in a world of hurt. That's not that's not good for anybody. So yeah, that's just, I guess that's where I would start. That's what I would do. So you guys that asked me how to get started farming or whatever, that's where I would start. If you can rent that little piece of ground and raise those animals, you never know where that could lead. If you rent 5 acres, 10 acres in the corner of some guy's field and you're raising animals out there and it's going good, you don't believe how many people drive by and see that. You know, Farmer Joe down the road could be 80 years old, and he might drive by your animals every day there in your garden and everything that's flourishing, and he might talk to Farmer John, who you're renting the land from, and Farmer John might say, yeah, they're renting this from me. They want a farm down the road or homestead. Well, he's gonna maybe put a seed in Farmer Joe's head that, hey, well, I wonder, I'd like to meet these people. Maybe they want to take my farm over because I ain't got anybody to take it over. You never know where it could lead. You never know. You don't know what's down our path. Nobody does. So you never know. Just be safe. You know, it's better to be safe than sorry. So that's what I would do. Yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna end this video right now because I really don't know what else to say, and I could just prolong, make this video longer and longer. But if you guys do have any more questions or comments, leave them in this video. If there's something more specific you want to know, leave me a comment and I'll write it down and I'll make a video trying to be more specific to answer your specific question. The questions I have are how do I farm, whatever, how do I get started farming. I mean, I don't know where to begin. I mean, there's so much on that topic. So if you have anything more specific, leave me a comment. I'll make another video trying to explain better, and we'll go from there. Anyways, if you like this video, please leave me a comment, hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and as always, I will catch you on the next one.